How's it going, guys? Welcome to Audio Addiction. We have New Fury with us, New Fury Media with us, and he can say his name and what he does.
Hi, Bradley here. Yeah, this is my brainchild. It's easily the most successful thing I've ever accomplished in my life, other than having a 5-year-old, which he's actually sleeping in the other room right now. And a lot of times I actually take him with me periodically when the class isn't around to shows. Like I took him to go see and interview North Lane with me last year. That was actually the first show he ever really went with me to. So that was a good time. And then, we've been to probably half a dozen shows since then and stuff like that. So really, once this all blows over, I love taking him with me and, basically getting him to experience any of the things I get to. Because I know that when he gets older, he'll see a lot of the stuff I've been able to do and think, hey, if my dad can do that, why don't I try to do something awesome like this? I mean, it's a lot of fun for me, so why not bring the 5-year-old? He's so well behaved anyway.
There you go. Well, that is very cool. I wish my dad took me to shows, because obviously, which we can go into in another time. But the first thing would be Bradley. Obviously, we've been internet friends for a couple years now, and we usually just exchange texts or messages and stuff like that. So, but I'm real curious on how New Fury had started out, because I kind of came in. I don't know how long you've been doing it for either, but I feel like we've known each other for just a long time, and I've just for some reason never asked, but I feel like now is the seminary time to ask about it. So how did you kind of start out with New Fury, and do you feel like when you originally started you kind of had what type of goals were you trying to shoot for, and do you feel like you've achieved it at this point, or is it something that you're daily working at to get to the next step?
That's a good question because I know a lot of the most successful people you'll find in life, and I'm not saying I necessarily am that person, although a lot of people seem to think I am. Whatever.
You're pretty successful. I'll give you that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But basically, I would say that I've accomplished pretty much all of my shorter term goals. I had a 5-year plan built up when I started this thing in late 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And especially 2013 when this became my own thing. Basically, I had a website that I was writing for that kind of transformed into what you see now, because I took basically a lot of the way the site looks. I'm not a graphic designer, but I built pretty much the layout and stuff like that in WordPress myself. And all the plugins and stuff like that. That's all stuff I had to teach myself. So basically, I started this thing in late 2011.
Sure.
I didn't have, I wasn't married. I didn't have a kid. I was, I pretty much didn't really have a whole lot except for a real love for writing. And I've always been the kind of person that listens to a lot of different kinds of music. I don't necessarily say I listen to everything, because I feel like that would be, I guess, disingenuous is the right word, because nobody really listens to everything. It's impossible.
True.
But I've always listened to a lot of stuff. And as I get older, I find myself listening to more pop and electronic stuff than I do other stuff. But I still, of course, I love rock, metal, alternative, pop punk, all the really good stuff. I can never say no to it, honestly.
Yeah.
But basically, it started in late 2011. At the time, I didn't really, I had no responsibilities. I was living with my grandparents at the time. God bless them for helping me do a lot of the stuff I needed to do without a car and stuff like that. Although, to be fair, I did live 5 minutes from downtown St. Pete, so right before I moved, that obviously helped. But basically, I took my love of writing and got hooked up with someone who ran a fairly big size publication, Tim Morris. Still a very good friend. Still lives in Florida too, about an hour north of Tampa. So, but basically, he taught me a lot of the stuff, not necessarily the writing stuff, but how to email PR people, labels, stuff like that to get the stuff I wanted. And I
Hmm.
found out that it was really, really easy, even just starting off when you didn't really have a fan base. So basically, I took a lot of that knowledge and started my own thing about a year and a half from there. Even in that first year and a half, though, I went to all kinds of shows. I went to Warped Tour, did like 15 interviews in one day, which is something that people know me for, like, and stuff like that, which is cool. Because if I'm at a festival like that, you know, I feel like it's really important, especially in this industry, to try to make connections with people.
Yeah.
Because while I don't expect everyone I've interviewed over the years to remember me necessarily, I always want to leave a positive impression on them
Same.
and actually have something to say. Like you, it's not the same five questions over and over again. It's
Yeah.
it's profound stuff about you know the new album, or even off the wall stuff that wouldn't normally get asked, but will actually have a good answer coming out of it. So that's a lot of the stuff I learned in my first year and a half. And since I started New Fury Media in early 2013, it kind of snowballed from there. And like, I don't pretend to be like the biggest publication out there or anything, but I would like to think that I do more with limited resources. First of all,
Yeah.
my resources are very limited. I make a little bit of money, don't get me wrong, but it's all pretty much without exception. I reinvest it into either advertising or assisting bands who may not have the kind of fan base to, put up $100 sponsored posts on their page. So I'll let them do it on mine, and then that way I make a little bit of money. But they do, they recoup a lot of that stuff just from the advertisement, because it's a lot easier to gain a fan base with another Facebook page that has, a good amount of
Sure. Yeah.
fans than when you're just starting out on your own. So that's one little thing that I like to do to help out other people. But yeah, like I was saying, it pretty much snowballed from there. I've talked to so many bands and musicians over the years, some of which are no longer with us. One of the big ones I did was Wayne Static from Static X.
Oh
I'm a
wow.
big new metal fan. Yeah, this was about a year before he died, and I think 2015, 2014. I think it was late 2015, if I remember correctly. Really cool dude. The hair was as crazy as you would expect, and I remember being really sad when he died.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been sad anyway, because that band was a big part of me growing up. They weren't necessarily my favorite new metal band, but they were pretty far up there. I listened to them a lot. So it always sucks knowing that someone who provided a soundtrack to your youth, so to speak, isn't there anymore. But I had the opportunity to chat with him about a year before he died, and that was a pretty big highlight for me. That was a really good time. And then a couple years before he died, maybe no, this was actually way back in maybe 2013 Warped Tour, 2012
Hmm.
Warped Tour. It was one of the first Warped Tours I did for press, but I got to chat with I think Joshua and Kyle from We Came as Romans,
Oh.
and as that, yeah, and that was really sad for me too, because it's funny, I wasn't the biggest fan of them at the time, but I liked a lot of their music for sure. And I felt like with their last album, they could have got, and if Kyle was still in the band, they could have gone really, really far with him, with the
Yeah.
kinds of sound that they were going
I
for.
agree with
They
that.
still can, obviously. Oh, for sure. But I got to talk to him at Warped and Joshua, and it was really cool because, like, I don't necessarily idolize these people. At least I hope not. But I was really stoked to have a conversation with both of them, just because at the time, I think it was 2013 Warped Tour, because Tracing Back Roots had just dropped, I think, and it hit like the top 15 on the Billboard Top 200 or something like that. So it was a really good first week for
Yeah.
them. This was back just a few years ago when metalcore and post-hardcore bands would do that. So at the time, it was a very big deal to get that story out there and stuff like that. And I've done all sorts of stuff since then, but that was definitely a highlight. And it kind of reminds you that life is, whether you're in the music industry or not, life is very fragile.
Yeah.
And any opportunity you get to chat with an artist, generally speaking, especially if you can get a good story out of it, it's really important. That's, right now, at least, well, before the coronavirus nation attacked, um, a lot of times I'll go to a show because I work. What a lot of people don't know is that I generally work as a security guard at night because it's very conducive to the kind of work I do for New Fear Media, which you're working at night. Yeah, you can probably write stuff at 3 a.m. for the next day. It's kind of nice, but a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just go to a show and do a couple interviews before my shift, and then just go into my shift for work, edit all the stuff, and go from there. It's really easy to do, and I like doing it that way because I don't have to take the night off of work, which I really can't do with having a small family and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, it's been pretty crazy to get this far, but at the end of the day, I still have a long way to go. I still have a lot of things that I want to do with this platform that I've been able to build, both with the help of myself and with my staff that helps me immensely. I mean, I can't do photography. That would be huge. That would be asking a lot out of me. Like, I do other stuff pretty great, but not that. So it's really just about getting those more long-term goals out and stuff like that. But yeah, it's taken me further. Even if I stopped completely today and was just like, I don't want to do this anymore, which never gonna happen. But barring something unforeseen.
Yeah.
But I've seen and experienced a lot of things that people don't get to, and I feel very privileged for that. It's not the kind of thing where, and I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool to get albums months before they're released,
Yeah.
but at the same time, people have to know that it's a privilege. Like, it's not something I enjoy bragging about. It might be something I reference on the internet once or twice, like, I've heard that before. Or like I heard it last month, it was really good. But it's not something that anybody needs to brag about. It's just something that's really fun at the end of the day. And if you can get paid for it, which unfortunately doesn't happen for everyone,
Yeah.
You've got to do a good job of monetizing things and have a strong sense of business too. And while that's not my strong suit, I'm getting there. So I'm very stoked with everything that I've been able to do so far. But like I said, there's a long way to go if I want to keep things moving up, as it were. Sorry.
No. I totally get it. And a lot of the stuff you were saying to me rings a lot true to what I do and stuff like that. Like, and we've talked before, like even prior to this, and just talking about like different stuff like in this industry and like, like that sort of thing. And it just kind of blows my mind that like you and I can like kind of get each other on this because we basically do a similar thing. And I remember when you first messaged me and you were like, yo man, like, dig this stuff, and we had this really cool conversation, and I still think we do have cool conversations. That's totally not the question, but I was very stoked because then you like hit me up and I got this text and you're like, yo man, would you want to do stuff for like New Fury? And I was just kind of like thrown back, and I don't even know if I've even told you this, but I was like kind of like floored because I was like, it would be cool, but then I'm also like, I also get your standpoint on like what you want. You have a great staff too. Like, your writers are really fantastic, and I try to make sure to check out like a lot of the stuff that not only you post, but just like your staff in general. And for me, I was just like, I know what I want to do, and like I feel like you understood, even if like we weren't gonna work something out. You understood. You're like, like he's doing this because he wants to do it, and I have to respect that he wants to do it, the way that he wants to do it. And I just wanted to say thank you for that, because that was very cool for me to see, like, somebody like that I know that's doing stuff, like, because I know you've been doing it for like a long time. I just didn't know how long. I was like, I think it was like 2011, because I remember seeing some like smaller posts, because I've been in this scene for a very long time, and I would see posts about, from like your page, about like certain albums. I'd be like, holy shit, like, I was like, I love that record. How does, like, he knows about it, how does he know about it? I was like, that's awesome. And then when you like approached me about doing stuff for like New Fury, like early on, I was just like, this is really cool. I was like, but then it made me kind of think, like, do I want to continue doing this to, like, to, obviously I'd love to benefit what you do, and obviously you coming on is really great, and I hope that other people check out your medium on what you do. But I was just like, I love doing this, like, I don't want to stop doing this, I don't want to stop making videos and doing stuff. And so I was just really like appreciative of what you said, even though like obviously it didn't wind up going the way that it was planned to go. But I was just like, I gotta tell Bradley on this like video that, like, I appreciated him for reaching out and like being like, yo man, I appreciate your content, like what you're doing, because like, it meant a lot to me. And then ironically enough, I remember pitching Sam off to you and being like, yo, you should check out my friend Sam, she does some really great writing. And I just remember sending that over, and I was just like, I'm like, I have no guarantee that he's gonna say no. Like, if he says no, I'll be like, I'll quit, I'll stop doing this thing, I'll stop doing this thing tomorrow. And I remember you sending me the text back, and you're like, dude, she's great, like, we're gonna do it. And I remember her shooting me a message like not that much longer after, and she was like, Bradley from New Fury hit me up, like, and she was like, she told me that you like referenced me and stuff about like doing like stuff. And I was just like, yeah, I was like, because you're a great writer, and I was like, you deserve to be on somebody's team writing and like getting up there. And I was just really stoked, even though it wasn't like my opportunity to be a part of that. I was really stoked that you took her on as a writer. So I guess you could talk about like the other staff. I know Alex and I are friends on Facebook as well. So like basically who helps you kind of facilitate some of the other stuff if you're not doing it? I know you do a lot of it, but
Yeah, I definitely don't do all of it, mainly because there's, like I mentioned, I'm not a photographer. There's some stuff that I cannot do. I usually delegate a lot of the business stuff to someone who's more skilled at me than that. Unfortunately, I tend to be usually the most skilled person at that too, and a lot of people are just doing other stuff. So I figure if nobody, if I just haven't really found the right person to help me with a lot of that business stuff yet. I found people that will help me with certain things and are a huge help, but like I think it would really take finding one or two people with a lot of business sense to help me, kind of reach the next level as far as mainly just the whole bringing in income aspect of it. But I'm trying some things, especially with social media and stuff like that, because I know a lot of people don't have necessarily the same kind of outlets I do to get reach and traffic and stuff like that.
mm-hmm.
So I try to help out others where I can, and then it's kind of my way of paying it forward, because if there's one thing that has helped me get this far, it's the help of other people helping me. So yeah, I would probably say that my staff mainly covers the photography aspect of it. I have some of my photographers, especially my friend Maya, who's actually a better writer than she gives herself credit for, and that's one thing that I wouldn't say I dislike it, but like it bugs me a little bit when people, how do I word it, basically are convinced that they're not really good at something, or like they don't think they're too good at something, like writing or another skill that they might have or think they don't have or something like that. So yeah, basically my team helps me out mostly with photography. and then sometimes business stuff, and then a little bit of writing here and there. A couple of the new people that I brought on board recently, Sammy, who's I know she's going through some stuff right now, so shout out to her for being extremely helpful to me when and where she can.
Yeah.
And then the big one I brought on lately is, also my friend Alex D. Likes a lot of the same music as I do, but it's also helped me actually find a few new bands, like a Marionette a little while
Yeah.
back, which was an awesome band. I know you love them too, so I figured I'd give them a shout out.
Yes.
Um,
Marionette.
who else? The big one lately is my friend Mike. Mike R. We'll just say Mike R. He also, and this actually isn't something that I really knew until recently, but he's very good at social media, and he also runs the page's cartoon frames, which is almost at 1 million. And he helps me out with the occasional share and stuff like that, just so I can get some more traffic. But basically, I would say right now he's my primary writer. That's not me, and I actually messaged him right before I moved out here because I was gonna have probably a week away or so that I wasn't gonna be able to push out very much content except for a few hours at night because I was driving all day.
Yeah.
So he helped. While I was on the road from Florida to California, he helped me out with a lot of stuff, and he's been more or less posting an article or so a day, which I realize that not a lot of people can have the time to do that. But basically, he's a really good writer, and he fits a lot of the criteria I'm looking for, and I don't really have to coach him on like stuff like SEO or how to get more reach and traffic on your content and stuff like that. So it's helpful for me not to have to necessarily push it all myself, which again, that's something I'm good at because I've taught myself how to do that and I've kind of learned over the years. But it's really helpful to have someone like him on board where he can act kind of as an extension of me, and then pretty much, he's not necessarily a clone of me though. He has other traits and things that he's good at that I'm not. So again, a lot of what you see written is me, but it does also come from Mike, Alex, Maya, and our other staff members too, when where they can. But I'm also not the kind of person who really likes to ask a photographer to write stuff, especially if they're not comfortable with it. Like, I know I wouldn't want to do that, so why would I make anybody else do
Sure.
it? But, yeah, hopefully that answers everything in a kind of winding route, I suppose.
No. I kind of know some of the stuff just because we talk on a semi-frequent basis, so I know a good majority of your staff at this point. So it's really cool to see kind of the growth of that. And again, one of the primary reasons why I wanted to have you on to talk about this is because I appreciate the work that you do, and I appreciate a lot of the work that other people do in terms of press work, because it's a lot of the time, and as it's a thankless kind of a part of the business, but it's also extremely crucial because you figure for example, at time day of recording, which is the 25th, Dance Gavin Dance dropped a new record. So if you figure people didn't give a shit about Dance Gavin Dance and none of people wrote about it or whatever, you figure how much traffic or how much potentiality that record would have if no one wrote about it, if no one made videos about it, if no one did any of this sort of stuff. So for me, obviously I want to have people on that do a whole bunch of different things, but when I had messaged you about it, and I know you were in the process of moving, so I was just yeah, whenever you can, I get it. I was like, I have to get Bradley on because I know how hard he works at his craft, and obviously his staff are all great writers too, especially the ones that do write. And for me, it's I know how hard it is to get people out there to be do press, everybody's about doing press and stuff like that. And so I was very stoked when you were yeah, I really want to be on and talk about my process, my story, and how I got started in it, because I feel for myself that was how I started out doing this. Like, I didn't know anybody either. I just did it because I was like, I love music. I'm passionate about it. And I'm just like, I don't care if I like don't know anybody. I'm like, I'm just going to do it because I enjoy doing it. And I want other people to like see my point of view on a certain record, or like, you know, I want bands that I enjoy that are smaller to get bigger. And you know, it's cool to see kind of the parallels between us and like doing different things. Like, I know we both have a deep love for Thornhill. I love that band so
Mm-hmm.
much, and
Me
I
too.
know we give any opportunity to talk about that band. So I feel like shouts to Thornhill. If you happen to scroll about and watch this, feel free to come on the channel if you want. But I was, like I said, I was very stoked to have you on more. Like, I've had a lot of great people on, but I like in my head I was just like, I have to ask Bradley, because I was like, I appreciate his work, and I was like, hopefully other people when they watch this, they're gonna appreciate your work as well too. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, it, a lot of this stuff is stuff that I don't really talk about with a whole lot of people, mainly because I feel like it would bore a normal person to hear about what I do.
true,
Like,
yeah.
a lot of what I hear from people is like, "Whoa, do you go to shows? Do you go backstage with people?" Like, I mean, maybe, but like, it's not really what people think.
Yeah.
But it also is. Like, what I've learned over the years is that most musicians, for the most part, are fairly normal people. This is just what they happen to be doing for a living. And I totally get why people can have an emotional overcorrection to stuff like that. Like, oh my gosh, it's a vocalist from my favorite band. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, again, nothing wrong with that. I've done that once or twice. Like,
Yeah.
I got
I've done
to,
it too.
a funny story. I got to interview Sonny from POD, the
Oh
actual
wow.
vocalist
Oh, that's
who
cool.
sung. Yeah, that was a highlight. Eh, Pretty much the vocalist for one of my favorite bands for a long time. Still kind of is. But like for a really long time, I listened to POD a lot. So when I got to do that, it was at first it was like, oh my gosh, is this really happening? But at the end of the day, like me, well, not at the time, but soon to be, um, he had a family, so there wasn't really a whole lot of parallel between, or well, there was a lot of parallel between, you know, him and myself. I may not be a musician, but I'm interested in getting that person's story out to the world, and it's something that I really enjoy. Again, I really enjoy doing it because every musician has a different story to tell,
Hmm.
and let me tell you, that guy had stories for days. So that was definitely a highlight.
But that's really cool. You know, like, I think you get to tell other people's stories in a unique way, and that's why, like, you know, I've always appreciated doing this, because it's something that, like, people are like, "Oh yeah, you had this, like, you hung out with this band. That's so cool." And I'm just like, yeah, I'm like, but I mean, they've also like stayed at my house, like, and they're like, no way, there's no way they stayed at your house.
Hmm.
And I was just like, yeah, they're just like normal people. I like made them breakfast. Like, it's like not that big of a deal. And they're like, oh my God, like, but that's so cool. Like, you get to do all this cool stuff. And, you know, I think from like an outsider's perspective, like, people just think you're like, oh my God, you're hanging out with these like rock stars. Like, this whole thing must, like, there must be like this like grandiose thing of like, it's like you're on the tour bus, like you're doing this sort of thing. And there's been plenty of times where that has happened, and it's been very cool. Like, the one band I can think of that was like just kind of like just like freaking out about was, I think it was prior to me starting. Yeah, it was definitely prior to me starting Audio Addiction, but I was on, um whose tour bus was it? I was on Memphis Mayfire's tour bus, and I remember at the time, like, I believe it was between like the Hollow and Challenger, like just before that, in between that time of them releasing those two records. And I just remember just being such a big like Memphis Mayfire fan, and my one buddy at the time, like, he knew Kellen, the guitar player from Memphis Mayfire, and he was just like, yeah, just come back to the bus, like, we're gonna be hanging out and all that sort of stuff. And I just remember like my friend telling me, he's like, oh, we're gonna go hang out at Memphis Mayfire's bus, like, you wanna, like, are you cool, like, is everything all right? And I was just like, yeah, like I want, like Maddie's gonna be so cool and like all that stuff, and I was like freaking out. And then I realized, then like now realizing it, just and just doing like the whole press thing now is just like, I was just like, I shouldn't have like freaked out. I was like, it was just a cool, like it should have just enjoyed the moment and not been like so like out of my mind, like freaked out, like, oh my god, I'm meeting Maddie from Memphis Mayfire, and I love the Hollow, and it's like my favorite record, still one of my favorite records. And I was just like having that moment, and now like now looking back at it, now being older, I'm just like, I was like, I basically do that like generally, like when I'm at shows, like I'm just doing that normally. So like now it just feels like a normal occurrence. But like I was saying earlier, it's just something that I feel like most people wouldn't understand, and I'm glad you get it, at least because we talk about it all the time. And it's just insane to me. Like people are like, oh yeah, that's cool. And like even my parents now are like, when when I was living with them, they were like super cool with having like people stay over and stuff. And it was really cool. It was a really cool experience. And I can't imagine, like, when being a parent and stuff, and then being like, yeah, I remember like I was interviewing all these bands and stuff. And I'm sure you tell your kid, you're just like, yeah, I interviewed these bands and stuff. And it must be a cool thing to like for your son to hear those sorts of things and be like, wow, this is what my dad does like for fun. Like, that's so awesome. Like, and now I'm going to do, like, if I'm something that I'm stoked about, now I'm going to do it, like it's really cool. So I appreciate the stories that, like you tell your sons about, like, and taking your son to shows. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, because like ever since I started doing that, I always get at least one or two comments from somebody at a show, like, "Oh my gosh, is that your son?" Yeah, I mean, it has to be because he's a copy of me, like down to mannerisms and stuff like that. So yeah, it's always been a really cool experience to bring him to shows and hear the comments from people like, "Oh my gosh, you're so cool for bringing your son to a show." Like, I mean, I get that it is cool because it's not really normal for
Yeah,
people to do that. I guess I don't know if normal is the right word. I guess uncommon.
yeah,
But either way, I always wanted him, especially even from the moment I found out that I was going to be a father. Um, it was a bit of an adjustment period for sure. But I know the one thing that I really wanted him to know is that if I can do stuff, then he can do all the stuff too. And so, I mean, that's pretty much the way it's gone so far. I mean, again, he'll, how do I word this? The more times we have together, the more kinds of cool experiences he's going to have, and he may not remember them all, but as he gets older, he'll start remembering more of them. And I mean, especially, I'm really hoping I can get back to some shows later this year or next
yeah,
year. We'll see what happens. It's pretty it's pretty up in the air right now, obviously. But that's always been the one thing that I've wanted him to know, that you know if you enjoy doing this stuff, then follow my footsteps. Or if you want to do something else completely, do that too. I'll support you in whatever you do. I just know for me, this has always been my outlet to write about something that I happen to know a lot about, and I'm passionate about it too. And I would hope that I can inspire other people to do the same things, because again, it's a lot of fun, but it's also work. But if you're
yeah.
willing to put it in work, learn some new skills and stuff like that, you can go really far. I mean, I wanted to get this far like I have, but I never really thought I would. You know, but I don't know. It's been pretty fun so far, but there's a lot left to go.
I feel the same way. You never know what can happen. You just should just take the strides and, like you said, network with people and have, obviously, if you enjoy doing that, you should try to do your best bet to do what you can to do stuff that you're excited about. But which kind of leads into my next thing, Bradley, which is like, what type of advice do you have for people starting out? Like, I mean, I've talked about my sort of advice doing YouTube and stuff. So, what are some like things that you learned or picked up on, like, going throughout, you said you started this back in like 2011. So like, you have I think you have more experience than I do talking about this, but like, what were what are some of the things you learned along the way doing this sort of thing that you could give to other people that maybe, inspire them to either do it, or like advice to be like, like this is something that I had been through and like got out of it, and this is how, maybe you could, get out of it as well, or, start up a blog or YouTube channel or whatever it may be.
Well, I would say one thing that's important to note is that here's the thing. I know musicians get shit from a lot of people for especially bad activities that they may do, whether it's, you know, substance abuse or what else, like stealing from people, or even, God forbid, like sexual assault or
Mm-hmm.
something dark along those lines. And it's not really this isn't really my platform to, you know, talk about that stuff necessarily. But I will say that there's, at least, you know, from what I've met and stuff like that and things I've experienced, there's a lot more nicer musicians than people would think. And like I said before, most of them are regular people who are trying to do the right thing, work hard, help other people, and are there for the right reasons, you know. So, at least from what I've seen, that's pretty much what I've experienced. There are bad eggs, for sure, though. Um, so, no matter what kind of role you fill in the music industry, or even if you're a normal person who's kind of an outsider to this field, just be aware that some people may not have your best intentions in mind. Now, my advice for people would be, again, you know, there's a lot of nice people out there for sure, but if your passion is specifically writing about music, um, chances are you're not going to want to start your own publication. And I say that because if me saying that to somebody drives you away, you weren't really meant to do it. And that's not a bad thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
really not for everyone though. But if you want to do it anyway, then basically what you're going to want to do is be prepared to work a lot. A lot. It took me probably 2 to 3 years to get, you know, figure out who my fan base even was. And it took me a little bit longer than that to get even remotely good at social media. Now, I have, you know, when I'm not writing or editing audio or something like that, what a lot of people don't know is that now my primary mode of traffic is just creating memes. Like, you know, memes and other content that people like. You know, there's a big thing going around right now that I've been doing for years, and so other people. Basically, since we don't have a lot of as much musical stuff going around as far as, you know, shows and stuff like that, people have been creating those album collages that you see, like, oh, pick three of these awesome albums from
Mm-hmm.
some year 15 years ago. Like, I've been doing that stuff forever, but it's not an original idea, you know.
Sure.
I don't pretend it is or anything like that. But basically, you have to be good at creating content that people will enjoy and, you know, get something out of. It could be funny, it could be edgy or provocative. I'm not really good at that, for the most part. It could be shit posting. I am good at shit posting, and sometimes it gets to the point where people don't know that or whether I actually like a lot of these bands or not. For instance, like, a lot of my shit posting revolves around new metal bands, because that's stuff that out of all the bands I listen to and genres of music, I probably listen to new metal more than anything else. That's something that not a lot of people know. Or, you know, Linkin Park, Deftones, all those bands,
Yeah.
favorites. Even the not so good ones I like, for the most part. Um, but you've got to be really good at creating content and being in tune with, you know, what other people are doing.
Yeah.
but you can always take it and kind of mold that content in your own way. Like, for instance, I'm not necessarily as big into pop punk as a lot of other people are, but I do love the genre for sure, and I'm educated in it enough to know what a lot of people are going to like. If I'm going to write about a pop punk band that's up and coming or something like that, I want to do it from a perspective that's educated. So a lot of the stuff I'm educated in are numbers and facts. For instance, the new August Burns Red album, it didn't chart so hot in the Billboard Top 200, but that doesn't mean that they're not a popular band anymore.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that had to do with all the coronavirus stuff going around. People don't have a lot of disposable income right now, more now than ever.
Yeah.
So, I noticed that, for instance, apparently with the new record, they sold over 1 million albums in the USA, and they posted about it on their Facebook. But I haven't seen any other publication post about that yet. So a lot of times what you've got to do is, instead of seeing what other people are creating, sometimes you have to create it yourself, just from seeing it online or seeing it, elsewhere or something like that. So that's one thing that you've got to be good at if you're going to gain a fan base of your own. Now, if you don't feel comfortable starting the publication, which, again, not for everybody, and a lot of people just aren't going to be able to do it after a while.
Yeah.
There is a point in time where, it was only a couple years after I started New Fury Media that I found that I was going to be a father. And I enjoy this way too much to ever consider quitting, but I was always worried about, how much of my time is going to have a family take up?
Yeah.
It's going to have a family. Is having a family going to take up
that time?
It is a lot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's quite a bit for sure. I regret nothing, of course. It's a huge blessing being able to get to do both, and I'm very thankful for it. But what I do know is that you've got to be willing to sacrifice a lot of time and energy to do this stuff, and be prepared to not have it pay off right away, because it didn't for me. A lot of the small victories I had were either being acknowledged by somebody that I really liked,
Mm-hmm.
or even landing a big interview with a big band and having it go really well, and then them have it remembering me years on. That happens frequently to me now, which is nice. But
Yeah.
that wouldn't happen as much if I didn't put in the work, years worth of work that I did before. For a lot of people, a lot of these skills just don't come overnight. Initially, my main skill was only that I was good at writing about music, I was passionate about music, and I was willing to listen to other stuff that wasn't, rock, metal, hip-hop, stuff that I was super familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said before, I listen to more pop and electronic music than I ever have in my entire 25 years of life prior to the last 5 years. So, and now everybody knows that I'm 30 years old as well. Fun times.
I'm not far off either, so I get, I'm 20. I'll throw myself under the bus. I'm 27, so I know.
Yeah, we're kind of old for this industry.
Yeah, so we are a little bit.
But I think the big point I'm trying to make is that most of the stuff does not come without working for it,
Yeah.
at least to some extent. But I'm to the point now where if I'm going to take time out of my schedule to cover a band with a review or something like that, or hey, check this out in under 300 words or whatever, I want us to be worth it. I'm not going to post, for the most part, I'm not going to post about a band who I don't think would necessarily fit my audience or get a lot of traffic.
Sure.
Because that's just kind of how it works. I don't have as much time as I used to, and the little time that I do have, I have to make sure that people are actually checking out my content. Because if nobody's checking out my content, I'm working for hours and hours doing it. I can't I can't do that. That's working harder when I don't have to with no payoff instead of working smarter and getting more of a payoff because I utilize that time that I had to get more results out of it. And that's what it boils down to um, when you get to my size and stuff like that. But again, I have a long way to go. I'm not a major. I don't pretend to be the CEO of a major publication or something like that. But I do a lot more work than people think, and it's always nice to get recognized for that. But the more you go on, if you want to be making a living doing this and getting paid like it or close to it, it's hard to do. A lot of times since ad revenue is pretty much dried up on the internet, especially for sites and blogs and stuff like that. You have to have, how do I word it? You have to have, I guess, something that sets you apart. And I think what sets me apart is that, again, I listen to more kinds of music than I ever did in my entire
Yeah.
life before. And I was already pretty open-minded about stuff. I listened to everything from prog metal to pop punk, and that's a
Wide
pretty
group.
spanning, yeah, that's a pretty wide group of varying musicians and bands already. But ever since I started this up, I there's very little that I won't listen to or at least try to check out. And I may not necessarily vibe with it completely, but a lot of times I do. And that band, for instance, kind of a too long didn't read version here, but I'm a big Paris fan. One of my favorite
Yeah.
bands for sure. I'm stoked for their new album. But I was actually able to interview Lynn from Paris, the vocalist, for those who may not know,
Yes.
at Warped about 6 months after White Noise dropped. They don't get me wrong, they were already gaining in popularity for sure. It's getting up there really fast, and I'd heard of them about a year before White Noise dropped. So when I found out I was going to be able to chat with her at Warped, it was really cool. That was a great experience. Definitely one of the better experiences I've been able to have happen in my life. Um, but what I noticed is that that's music that before then I probably would have checked out and enjoyed to some extent, but I wouldn't have necessarily had it on repeat as much as I did. And it's a lot of that and other bands, even more obscure musicians too, is because I took the time to check that out and to be exposed to it. And like I said, a lot of times I end up liking it. So basically my job description is, if I'm into something, I want other people to know about it too.
Yeah.
So whether it's Paris or an obscure pop punk band that eventually blows up like the Wonder Years did 10 years ago, all that stuff is in between my wheelhouse and stuff like that. And I feel like out of everything, you've got to be willing to go outside of your comfort zone musically. Not necessarily too far out, but if you're only willing to listen to one or two genres of music, and for that to be the stuff you're already familiar with, I'm not going to say you won't necessarily get far, because I don't think that's necessarily correct.
Yeah.
But you're going to open up yourself to more opportunities by branching out into different stuff that you like to cover or talk about or whatever. If you run a podcast, podcasts or you're writing or stuff like that, that's definitely important to do. So basically open your mind, as they say. And I feel like that's where a lot of my successes come from, because now, instead of just talking about my 10 favorite new metal bands on a daily basis, which, I mean, that's fun for sure, instead of doing that, I can talk about the latest indie pop albums and electronic albums just about as well as I can my favorite bands, to some extent, varying extents. I'm not going to be able to talk about a hip hop album necessarily as well as other people, but I'm to the point now where I can dissect something like that, explain it to people, and then not have it come out sounding like I don't know what I'm talking about, because I do. But a lot of that stuff came from experience, exposure, and a willingness to kind of open my mind to other stuff.
Oh no, absolutely. And I like I said earlier, I draw a lot of parallels to what you're doing, and like my over the past couple years, I would say probably like last year and the year before that, I've been trying to branch out and listen to different stuff. Just because obviously my wheelhouse is mostly like anything from like progressive metalcore to like like deathcore to like I love like Chon instrumental shit like jazz. Um, but then I've been delving into like more pop stuff. Like I've like very much like you, I had found out about Paris pretty early on. I think I found out about them like when they had their EP out, and it was like post-hardcore, and like no one
Mm-hmm.
knew about them. They were like this very unobscure band that like nobody knew about, and I was just like, I didn't have the YouTube channel at the time, but I was just like, this band's gonna be big. Like there's no, I have no doubt in my mind they'll get signed, and they'll be like a pretty large band. And then they just released a new record yesterday, so I think like it's super cool to see them kind of just skyrocket as a band in terms of just popularity and stuff. And I also think, like you said, it opens you up to new possibilities of like finding new bands, and you just never know that like if you're looking for music, this might be your next favorite band. Like you could like a pop band and be totally cool with it. Like I found out about this band called the band Camino, and they're like pop, but they're fantastic, and like no one knows, like they're of a relative obscurity, I would say. Like I mean, they are getting bigger, and they probably will be big because they were supposed to, I don't know if it will still happen, fingers crossed if it does, but they were supposed to go out on tour 5 seconds of summer, and that would have been, they
Mm.
would have just blew up. So I think I never beat myself up about trying to find out about bands. Like even if I find out about them later on, and I'm just like, oh, I should have found out. I should have started listening to them sooner. I just feel like, you know, opening yourself up to the possibility of finding out about new artists is always like a way for you to evolve. As like whether it be a writer, if you do stuff like me, like doing YouTube videos, it gives you that avenue to kind of do different stuff, and it doesn't just kind of pigeonhole you to like one specific thing. Like you're like if I go to New Fury, I'm not just like, oh, they're gonna be talking about like the next new metal band. Like I know I'll get kind of a good variety of music, whether or not like it's a band I'm familiar with, or it's a band that I like don't even know, that I'm like, yo, this band's sick. I don't know how they found out about them, but that's very awesome. And I think that's one of the cool things about doing this, is just being able to kind of cover what you like, but also kind of like finding these really cool bands that like come to you on stuff. So like I guess the next thing would be, Bradley, is like, do you have bands that submit stuff to you? Like I know you were talking about like sharing, like doing like ads and stuff for bands, and earlier on in this interview. And then what was one band that you like are really stoked on, that like came to you and were like, yo, like do you think we could do this, like, or something like that? I'm
Hmm.
just curious because I know you have a lot of great artists in your arsenal, so I'm curious if there's any really good bands that you came across recently, or they came to you recently and you're like, yo, these guys have the potential to be big.
Yeah, I would probably say in the last in the last 7 years, there's bands that have either come specifically to me, or a publicist really hyped them up enough. And a lot of times it was just from the band themselves. That's not always the case. So a really good publicist will get my attention, just from being, being themselves, and also being like giving, for instance, if a publicist I work with a lot knows the kinds of stuff I like and really wants to hype me up on it, yes, 100% they will get my attention. I I would have to think more about it, because I would probably say, out of, if I made a list of maybe 10 to 20 bands, musicians, etc., that I've discovered just from them emailing me, or me maybe barely hearing them about them, but not really, and then having them hit me up later, something like that. I would probably say a few of them, definitely Paris. There's one specific one that I really want to mention though, and that's my very good friends over in Vespera, who I know you know about. Yeah, see, you know what's up. Very, very talented rock band. They have elements of like, I wouldn't say new metal, but like alternative metal.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Um, yeah, metalcore, all that stuff. So it's accessible to people, but like when I was pretty much hooked on them from day one. Their vocalist Jonathan Wolf and I talk periodically. He actually lives in LA, so great dude, very intelligent. I would be friends with him whether or not he was in the band, but their publicist Becky actually, which is very interesting. She sold me on them. She was working with them for when they were releasing the Bloom video and stuff like that. So a couple years ago, and I was like, this is pretty good. And the more I heard it, the more I was like, I feel like this band has all the right things going on, and for a band that nobody really knew other than a handful of single releases, they're doing pretty well. They've had 3 tours canceled though, which is just ridiculous. Poor dudes. Yeah, they seem to be snake bitten in that regard, which sucks. But they have a lot of really good things going on for them. I would probably say that's definitely a top 5 band that I've discovered just from doing all this and getting an email. I would have to think about it offhand. I'll probably have to get back to you on that. But there's also one specific person I wanted to mention.
Sure.
So a couple months ago, maybe like a month before I moved from Florida, somebody hit me up through email, and basically, and I have to say, it was one of the most amazing emails I've ever been sent. And I say this because the person who emailed me, it was a kid, it was 12 years old. And, I think back to when I was 12, and his emails his email is super professional. Like,
I think I know who you're talking about now. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
know who
think
you're
you
talking.
do.
I know who you're talking about now. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, look him up on. Everybody listening to this should look him up on YouTube or wherever, or Facebook or whatever. Go follow him, like his videos, share them around. But his name is Traybell08. Basically, he took up guitar a couple years ago and started shredding along to like Polyphia, Veil of Maya, all that kind of stuff. For someone his age, he's very talented.
100%.
And yeah, and he's actually gotten a couple of his songs on major Spotify playlists, and that's not something that happens to somebody that young for the most part. So I would say, even if you're not even really into rock and metal, which how could you not be? No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, if you're watching this, how can you not be? That's true.
I know, right? But yeah, even if you're not necessarily into that stuff, that is a kid who's very talented and very young, and his parents have to be doing something right, nurturing that talent along. And I don't know what'll become of his music career, because it could be anything, But the fact that he's accomplished these things and being so young means that he has a bright future. And I feel very privileged. Some of the things he and I were saying back and forth, like he thanked me for my time and helping him out and posting some of his videos. I was able to help get him a lot of traffic on and stuff like that. And he was just very professional and polite about it. And as someone with a young son himself, like it melted me. Like, I'm a sucker for kids. I'm a sucker for anybody who is young and trying to get their talent out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been one of my favorite recent experiences. There's also one I really want to give a shout out to. So I'm not sure if you know her or not. She's kind of getting her name out there a little more, but very talented friend of mine named Cleo Cadence. So why she's important is because I it was around this time last year, not quite a year ago though. It was like June or something.
Okay.
But she put out a pretty good cover of Billie Eilish's "You Should See Me in a Crowd," and obviously that was very well timed to help get her name out there and stuff like that. But it was a pretty good cover. It's kind of like your post-hardcore goes pop cover. But her voice, she's got a very good voice, and I found out that she was doing a tour with Dead Girls Academy and a couple other bands.
I think I know what tour you're
forget.
talking about. I don't remember the lineup, but I remember getting an email about that too, so I know.
Yeah. But either way, so I was able to chat with her on that tour and stuff like that. And I brought Cameron with me too. We weren't able to stay for the show because it was kind of late. But she's working on new music now. She just released her debut single as a solo artist, "Drive," which it's a pretty catchy track, honestly. It actually got to over 100,000 streams on Spotify, which isn't necessarily like world changing, but for her, that's a pretty good start to any kind of a career. Like not a lot of people, musicians, can ever say that they were able to get a song with 100,000 streams on Spotify,
Sure.
and it keeps climbing too. So she would definitely make my list, especially recently. And it's nice to work with her in any capacity because I don't pretend to necessarily like know her, but from what I can tell, she's very hardworking at what she does, and she, she's pretty talented. That's definitely what I can say listening to her and stuff like that. And I feel very privileged any kind of part that I can help play in her career, and stuff like that. So I guess that's one of the big reasons why I like introducing so many new artists to people, because I've kind of always been that person in my life. So it's kind of an extension of everything I was doing, even in an official capacity, even though it wasn't really anything. So I would say those are a few of my favorite artists that I've discovered just from doing this. There's plenty of others though that I can't even begin to think of right now, and I know I'll be kicking myself for missing them.
Oh, don't
But
worry.
yeah.
I'll be hitting you up for a follow up, and basically post Brandon
Hmm.
will be posting all of the names on the screen of ones that you should check out. Hopefully, I think they would most likely still be around. So I'm very stoked on to see his list of who's found out about. But Cleo or Vesper, if you watch this, if you want to come on, feel free to. That'd be very cool. I'm not trying to plug my own stuff, but I figure since we're here, might as well ask. But which is appropriate because we were kind of talking on the same subject about this, Bradley. So I guess I've been asking a lot of band questions on here as like some fun kind of like icebreaker sort of thing. So who have you been listening to lately? What's on the Spotify? What are you jamming? At this current moment.
Well, I'm not going to look at my Spotify right now, mainly because my computer is across the room. I don't feel like getting it right now. So I'm just going to kind of go rapid fire as best as I can. I've been listening to a lot of Porcupine Tree and Steven Wilson lately.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I'm very big into prog metal. In fact, if you talk to me, you'll probably think I'm one of the prog metal snobs that you see people making fun of on the internet. I'm not quite to that level, but I do love me some prog.
Yeah.
I mean, Steven Wilson is just one of the most talented musicians I've ever heard in my life. In fact, in a span of probably 10 years, he made a couple of the biggest progressive metal albums ever in Dead Wing and Fear of a Blank Planet, which is a concept album. Um, and lately he's been putting out more like progressive pop rock stuff, like um, enjoy a lot. Oh,
Are we
are
good?
we back?
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good.
Okay, okay. But yeah, he's been putting out a lot of like progressive pop rock stuff that I really like. So I think he's definitely on my tops list of stuff I've been listening to lately. Like you said, the band Camino, I never really get them out of my head. I got hooked on them not right away, but I forget what song I heard, but I know it was on their debut album Try Hard that they
Yeah,
released late last year. Really good. I don't stop listening to that
same.
album for very long, honestly. Um, I've been listening to a lot of Deftones lately because that's my favorite band. So yeah, I kind of
Rightfully so.
talk about them. Yeah, I talk about them a lot. So they're definitely up there for me. What else have I been listening to? I've been listening to some old Amberlin records. They're pretty good.
Ooh, classic.
Honest, yeah. And I know it's very high praise to hear this, but they have definitely one of my favorite discographies of any band I've ever listened to. They're
I would
that
agree.
good
I
for
would
me.
agree. Yeah, they're up there.
Um, that's actually interesting that I mentioned them because a couple of the members from Amberlin and Acceptance, most of the, in fact, I think they all or almost all of them live in the St. Pete, Orlando, Lakeland area, and I think I think it may have been Becky Kovac who actually hooked me up with this, but a couple of them, Christian and I forget the other person's name. I'm terrible with names, so if you hear this and I can't remember your name, I'm so sorry. But they have a side project called Loose Talk, and it's like kind of like stoner rock, I guess you could say, kind of like the Black Keys, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
That's probably a good parallel to them. Um, but those guys all live in St. Pete, and this was a few months before I moved. So I wasn't basically there was a night where I wasn't able to attend their show or something like that. But basically, Becky or one of the other publicists for Big Picture, I think it may have been Dana or Becky, I don't remember. But those people are awesome for sure.
Yes, 100%.
Um, Yes, but basically we hooked it up to where she gave me their number and said, if you can't meet at a show, then go get coffee or something, because that's what I suggested. And I felt like that was, and it actually was a lot easier for me to do that. And basically, we just chatted for like 45 minutes after I had a job interview, and before, I timed it to where I put it right in between my job interview and when I had to pick up my son from school. So we grabbed coffee. They bought me coffee, which I didn't ask for, but it was a local place. And they were really awesome. They asked stuff about me, which doesn't really happen a lot.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't like sitting down with an intimidating musician or two. It was like I don't know. It was like meeting a friend.
Yeah.
You know, so I had a really great experience doing that. And they actually just put out a new song on Friday, and it's really good. So listen to it if you like riffs or rock music. Um, but yeah, that's definitely that's another experience I had, which was really cool. They're actually one of my kind of up there on my favorite things I've discovered just from doing all this. Again, I can't reiterate it enough. It's a privilege to be able to do this, and I'm so excited that anyone cares enough for me or about what I do to do this. Um, so yeah, Amberlin,
Yeah.
that was fun. Um, what else? I've been listening to Between the Buried and Me a lot. I really like progressive music,
Yeah.
progressive rock, progressive metal, anything that pushes the envelope. So I've been able to see them at least 6 or 7 times in concert. Um, definitely one of my favorite bands. I always go back to their discography periodically, so they're up there. What else? New Code Orange album was pretty good.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people talk about them now, but I remember seeing them at shows right around my local venue like 10 years ago when they were all kids, like 16, 17, and 18. It's been pretty surreal to see the direction they've
Yeah,
gone. I'm
and
totally
also
down
just
with it.
like also their growth as a band too. Like I feel like they've gone like such a long distance in that time. Like I found out about them more recently, so I can't say like I've
Mhm.
known about them this entire time. But it's cool to like I went back and looked, and I was like, wow, they've been a band for such a long time. So, shout out to Code Orange. But
Yeah, great band. I'm trying to think. What else have I been listening to? I've been listening to a lot of like '90s metal bands, honestly, like In
ooh,
Flames,
okay,
early Machine Head, stuff like Fear Factory,
yeah.
stuff that I grew up listening to, but I always come back to it for some reason. I don't know, like I preach a lot about opening your mind to different music, but I come back to a lot of the same stuff. So I have no shame in
You
that
gotta
at
have
all.
two. You gotta have open your mind to like new musical possibilities, but there's no problem going back and listening to those nostalgia bands. I totally get that.
A couple bands I did want to mention for more newer stuff that I know everybody will probably enjoy. Holding Absence put out a couple new songs. They're
Yep.
very good. I like Gravity a lot. And then the new Loathe album is
I was
wow.
gonna mention them. Well, I was gonna mention them because you said Deftones, and I just figured, I was curious your comparison on them to Deftones because I feel like I don't want to I don't want to put it out there in the universe, but I'm just gonna say I feel like they're like they are. I feel like they're a modern version of Deftones. Like obviously, Deftones is not a dead band; they're still
Mhm.
doing their thing. But I just feel like they're like a modernized version of like if Deftones was like coming up now and like was being a band. I feel like that, and I don't feel like that's an inaccurate statement. So, but if people want to fight me about it, that's whatever you want to do.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallels there for sure. But like the great thing about that band is that even on their previous work, which again I would probably say Loathe is very high in the top bands that I've discovered just from either them or their publicists reaching
Yeah.
out and introducing me. Um, in fact, they're probably in my top 10 somewhere, honestly. Um,
Same.
but yeah, um, the great thing about them is that they take their obvious influences and turn the music that they're creating into something different. Like you can tell who their influences are clearly: Deftones, Def Haven,
Hmm.
or stuff like that. And they really turn a lot of that stuff into their own. So it's hard for how do I word this? Basically, anyone who says that they're like a carbon copy of Deftones, I think are off, or at least slightly off,
Yeah.
because they do obviously to deny those similarities would be foolish.
Yeah.
I can't deny them. The band can't deny them either.
I can't either.
Um,
So yeah.
yeah. But I know from my perspective, you know, they're able to take a lot of what those other bands are doing, and again, it's their own music. It's the stuff and the world that they're creating for themselves, and I think it's very impressive. I'm curious to know what they'll do next. I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna be hard to top this. Like, yeah. So,
I've been sharing that around a lot just as of recently because I feel like I don't know, like I found out about them pretty early on. I think it was in between um, their first EP and Cold Sun. I remember
mhm.
I was like interviewing, I believe it was Sentinels. Shouts to Sentinels because they're from New Jersey. Um, they were like, "Yo, you should check this band out, Loathe. Like they're awesome." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll check them out." So I went to go check out their stuff, and then they had recently started with Sharp Tone, and I was just like, this band's sick. Like they have to be doing something. And then I went to go see them. I think they were opening for Wage War, and it's the only time I think they've
Mhm.
toured the states, to my knowledge. And I was just blown away. So, and then when they released this newest record, I was just like, I don't know how they're gonna be able to top this record for me. Like I feel like I'm calling it a little bit early, but it is one of my favorites of this year so far. I feel like to deny them of that would be very foolish of me. So I feel like they've been underrated for a while, so I'm glad a lot of people are giving them the justice that they deserve. Same with, I know we talked about it earlier, but Thornhill too. I feel like they are a heavily underrated progressive band. I just feel like a lot of Australian bands are just really good at doing progressive metalcore in general. So I feel like when you had shared about like Thornhill's newest record on New Fury, I was just like, I already knew you were gonna do it. I just had this like inkling because I was just like, if he likes progressive music, I know he's gonna do it. But it was cool to see your take, your guys' take on it and like versus mine. But that was a masterpiece too. I really enjoyed that. Dark Pool is fantastic. So people watching this, check out Thornhill too.
For sure.
But the next thing, Brad, another band related question. If you were to compile a dream tour lineup, who'd be on it?
Well, this is actually something that I've contemplated many, many times in my life. In fact, there's online, there's a Coachella lineup creator that
Mm-hmm.
you can use. I've done multiple ones just because of how much fun something like that would be. In fact, if I had a lot of money, that is literally what I would do. I would create a lineup like that
Yeah.
with pretty much an unlimited amount of money to fund all this stuff and do it that way. But that's actually a really tough question because if we're going to assume that it would be about five bands, um, I would probably do a lot of stuff that I like currently. So probably Porcupine Tree, Deftones, Thornhill would probably open, probably Loathe, and then in the middle, probably something like Churches, maybe. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 That is very. The churches pick got me. That's very interesting. I'm glad you chose them because they're great. Uh, but wow, that's quite an interesting lineup. I think that would work out pretty well though.
Yeah, part of my inspiration for that was actually when last year when Deftones did their second annual, basically Deftones Fest in San
Hmm.
Diego. Churches was playing that, and Deftones got a lot of flack for putting them on the same bill as Gojira and stuff like that, and which I think that's silly because I mean I get that there's a big divide between like electro indie pop and like alternative metal, but they actually have a lot more in common than you'd think. And anybody who's a Deftones fan knows that they have a lot of like not necessarily electro pop influence in their music, but that having them on a festival with Deftones makes a lot more sense than people think. So yeah, I like festivals like that have like pop musicians and then metal musicians like or even like rock on the same bill. I tend to be a pretty diverse person in general with what I listen to. So a lot of times I really do listen to a lot of pop and metal
Yeah.
back to back. Um, so yeah, probably something like that. I don't know, but it's very hard for me to choose only five because like there's hundreds of bands and musicians that I love, and honestly, if I really ever did, hit the lottery or something like that, I probably would try to fund something like that for an entire weekend or whatever. Get like a lot of my favorite bands in one place and go from there. Like it would be awesome. So I'm hoping someday, maybe we'll see.
Fingers crossed. I feel like that's kind of in the same wheelhouse of something I'd want to do too. So I respect
Hmm.
that tremendously. But the next question, Brad, who would be one person you'd want to have on your site? Like I know you do a lot of the interviews and stuff like that. So who would be one person that I don't want to say like you has evaded you, but what would be one person you would want to have on as like a dream person to interview?
Um, I'm not going to think too hard about this, so probably Steven Wilson from Porcupine Tree. I know he'd have a lot of stories for sure, just because he's been making music a long time
Mm-hmm.
and he's very diverse as to the kind of the stuff he makes. So there would be a lot to talk about, for sure. He would definitely be up there, and I think he'd probably be on top. Um, who else? The thing is, I've talked to a lot of
Yeah.
musicians that I've wanted to over the years. Because if I hadn't talked to them already, um, one of them would be Vincent Kavanaugh from Anathema, who very similar to Porcupine Tree, kind of a similar style of music that's evolved over the years. It was a super last minute thing. I was able to chat with him. It was like maybe earlier in the day we hooked it up, but it was an off day from the final hymn tour,
Oh wow.
and Anathema was a support band, and they don't come over here very often, like ever, maybe a handful of times, and that was actually the last time they did. So 2014, that was very very cool for me. It, 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 Definitely a person who's had a lot of stories, being in a successful band. But if I hadn't chatted with him earlier, he would definitely be at the top. I, I, I'm trying to think. Chester Bennington would have been up there.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of
Um,
people would choose that answer just because that's like the classic, you know. Well, we're kind of in the same age bracket, growing up with that, with not only like Hybrid Theory, but also like Meteora and stuff like that, and just how, impactful those both of those records are. Um, I would happen to agree with you. That's on my list too, but unfortunately, rest in peace. I don't will not happen, but I would totally agree with that. That would have been awesome.
if we're going to be more realistic, though, I would say Mike Shinoda, and I say
Oh,
that because, yeah, he, especially lately, now that he writes a lot of really good solo stuff, I feel like even since I was younger, that's someone I've always wanted to talk to because, again, he would have a lot of stories, but at the same time, like he's someone that I consider to be very, very intelligent,
mhm.
and with the way he writes, with his thought processes and stuff like that. So I feel like he would be very close to the top for me for sure. Again, a lot of it is because of how diverse he is and stuff like that. And I'm the kind of person that really connects well with other diverse people instead of, I don't want to say people that are pigeonholed, but like, I don't know how to word it without coming across as a total jerk. So I'll just say that, I connect more with diverse people, than the average person would.
Sure. No, I totally get what you mean. I think it's like, you find these sorts of things where, like obviously the more, I guess, interesting the person is, the more interesting their storyline is and stuff like that. And you want to kind of bring that to light. So totally, totally get that. And then the last thing, Brad, the most important thing, tell them about New Fury, obviously where they can find you out on social media, your website, and anything coming up, and I guess how bands can reach out to you, the best way that they can, like most feasible way.
Well, the best way to email me would just be to hit me up at newfurymedia2014 at gmail.com. That's what my site email is connected to. So basically, if you go on the website and try to email us, that's where it goes. Um, Generally speaking, I do get back to emails relatively fast. It depends on the email though, and it's got to catch my attention. I don't say that to be a jerk or anything. I just know what I've experienced over the last couple years, but especially over the last like year or so, is that I need to prioritize my time better. And if
Amen.
yeah, and I don't really like going through emails on my phone unless it's something either business related or Premiere related or stuff like that. So if I'm on my computer, then yeah, I'll send emails. Or if I'm at work, I'll send a bunch of emails. And that's where I do a lot of my work. So if you really need to get a hold of me, and if you really really want to get a hold of me, you can ask me for my phone number, and I'll probably give it to you. A lot of times I do that especially if there's some kind of premiere going on or something more, like I said, more business related. That if I always have a million things going on, and most of them are very important. So if my time is important to you, and vice versa, then hey, here's my phone number. Ask me, and I'll give it to you, because I may just need an extra reminder to make sure that I don't forget to post something on a certain day at a certain time. Now, generally speaking, I'll remember to do all that without much of an issue. But if there's something going on at work where I'm working extra, or I'm not sleeping a whole lot or something like that, for the most part, that stuff takes priority, because I actually need to be able to live. I will not name a name, but I did have one bad experience doing this. Basically, I don't want to give away too many details, but where I was living out in Florida, in St. Pete, we don't really get hurricanes. Like, one will brush by somewhat close to us. But when Hurricane Irma came through South Florida, and luckily, thank God, it weakened, because that would have killed a lot of people, especially in our area, if it had gone along the path that they thought it would originally. But this was around the time where I was working, I was working a lot of hours. So there was a band that wanted to do a premiere with me. And the thing about this premiere was that no money was exchanged or anything like that. It was a completely non-money involved activity. It was, I wanted to do a premiere for a band that I thought was dope, more or less. That was literally it. So as I was getting a lot of that stuff ready, my family and I, especially me, had very little time to prepare for that, because we didn't necessarily think that this was going to potentially kill us, because luckily for us, where my grandparents were at in Tampa Bay was very non-flood prone. It would have taken 40 feet of water to even really touch us, because we're on a hill. So, but basically what happened is the forecast kept getting worse, and I had to get my family up north to my other family to make sure they were out of harm's way. Having a small child when your power is going to potentially be out for a couple weeks, which it was. We had trees down in our neighborhood, and probably I was up for part of it because it was interesting to me, but before the power died, I was able to measure outside. The wind was going about 60, 70 miles an hour. It went by relatively quick, though. It was weakened, but needless to say, it was a big deal. I've been through stuff like that before, but that was pretty high up there. But basically, where I'm getting at was that I had the premiere was supposed to happen, and I get why someone would be potentially upset with me about that, like the band was. But again, I'm in the middle of a hurricane, and we had just talked about this a day or two before, and my priority is not for me to be telling my wife and 2-year-old, hey, we need to do something. I need to do something real quick and set this up and schedule it. That's unreasonable to me, especially if money isn't involved. If money is involved, that's slightly different. You have to make time for that. But again, not something I could really do, because again, our power was out for a couple weeks after, and that was in the middle of August. That sucked. Yeah, you have to have AC to live in Florida, for real. So where I'm getting at with that was that the band was pissed off at me and clearly didn't understand the situation I was going through, and because no money was involved, for them to have the balls to come at me like that, you didn't tell us or anything like that. First of all, I did tell you that something like this was happening. I even emailed you on my phone as I was starting to get everything ready for that night, because we had er, we had several big trees surrounding us, and if one branch snaps off or something like that, and hurts our house, hurts any of my family, we lose power. That's my, I'm not scared of hurricanes at all, especially because of where we were. But that was pretty serious. So, and again, I don't like talking bad about anyone for any reason. But basically, if you're going to email me, then just make sure you know that because I do pretty much all this stuff myself, like, I'm sorry if I can't get back to you right away, or I'm sorry if I can't help you in the way that you thought I would be able to, just because most of it doesn't come down to whether I want to or not. I would love to do this 24/7, but I have a job. I have a full-time job. I have another full-time job because having a child is a full-time job. I'm married, so that takes up a lot of time. And most of the stuff isn't stuff that I see any kind of income for. Some of it I do, which is nice, but not stuff like this for the most part. So basically, as long as you're valuing my time and stuff like that, I will 100% get back to you. If it's something I'm really interested in, I'll definitely get back to you. Email is the best way. I'll give you my phone number if we're working in that capacity. I'm not really shy about that either. And then I'm trying to think. Definitely, those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. I know that we have some cool stuff that's coming up. I'm kind of laying low for a while just because of all the COVID-19 stuff that's going around. A lot of publications are actually shutting down right now, more than they ever have before, even bigger ones, which is crazy. But they're not bringing in much income anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not giving this up so easily, though, because even if there's not a lot of new music content to write about, which there is, but even if there's not, I just enjoy writing about music that I like from any year. So it's easy for me to write about my favorite albums, and a lot of them happen to be older. So I push content out like that, like, a lot, and it's fun for me. So those are definitely the best ways you can get a hold of me. All social media, I think, should be New Fury Media. I post a lot of memes on Facebook and Instagram, so if that's how you found me, I'm kind of sorry, but not really, because I realized that humor and stuff like that is a necessary way to connect with people. If certain articles aren't going to blow up, then I'm going to make sure the meme is, because if that gets me 1,000 new fans, that's 1,000 new people that might check out the next article. And that's the goal at the end of the day. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love going on shit posting sprees, for real. That's probably something I'm sort of known for. But at the end of the day, I just want people to actually care about what I write and the kinds of bands that I like to talk about and promote. I'm not someone who's holier than thou about things, but for the most part, I try not to give airtime to. Again, I'm not the kind of person who likes to say whether someone is a good person or a bad person, or is you know what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if it's good, then I'll talk about it. And for the most part, I try to stay away from stuff that I'm either not educated in, or I'm just not into. Like, there's plenty of other people who will talk about the stuff that they're not into, and like, whatever works for getting traffic, dude. But for the most part, that's not me. There are exceptions, but I try. The thing is, any kind of art medium is obviously going to be open to criticism, and again, as a band or musician, you have to be able to be okay with that. Just as I don't mind if people are critical of my writing, but what I do know is that nobody could ever criticize or anything like that to do with facts that I present, or having like a lack of knowledge about this kind of stuff. Like that happens occasionally, which is very strange because it always seems to be something I know a lot about. So again, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about if you're an aspiring music writer or sports writer or something like that. Something that not a lot of people know about me is that I like sports and video games as much as I do music, if not more. So that's something you see on occasion. But again, my target audience is obviously music. But you have to have a very thick skin to work in this industry. And if I cried myself to sleep the first time someone had any little criticism about my writing, I don't know what I would do, because it's happened and it'll continue to happen. But usually you can tell who's making an effort to not be an ass about it versus someone who's just trying to get under your skin. And for the people that try to get under my skin, I just laugh them off because, I mean, I don't want to say that I'm doing this stuff and they're not, but I mean, kind of no other way of putting it, honestly. But I just try to have a really good attitude about this stuff at the end of the day, because again, if you're a fan of music, like, I can't think of anything better than being a fan of music and discovering your new favorite band. And at the end of the day, that's kind of, that's what I want to do for a living. Or even if it's older music that I'm able to help turn you on to that you may not have thought about before. That's just the stuff I'm passionate about. And I don't like having a bad attitude about stuff. I don't like talking negative about people or just shitting on the latest release or whatever. There's plenty of other people who do that. And if you like to listen to those people, then more power to you. But I'd like to think that I have a very unique voice, and I hope people appreciate that. I think they do, or at least it's starting to come around. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't really know what else to say other than that.
All right, well, go check out Bradley / New Fury Media. As you know, we've been good friends for a couple years now at this point, and it was a real pleasure to have him on and talk about his story about New Fury and just all of his writers. Go check out their stuff. He's really got an eclectic mix of different people that really put out content that they believe in, and it whenever I see an article or something, I'm like, they care about it, like they really want to do it, they're really into it. Even when I read stuff that Brad writes, I'm like, I know he's really dedicated to it, like he really wants to do it, he really wants that band to go out there. So and I think it's important for me to show that love to other people, because I feel like like we were talking about earlier, it's about paying it forward and stuff like that. So thanks to Brad for kind of doing this longer than I've known him for, but it's really great content. So check out the links below, guys. It'll be in the description, and check out New Fury Media. Great friends of the channel. And like I said, it was an awesome privilege to have Brad on and talk. And if you enjoyed this interview, make sure to like it, share it, subscribe. It goes a long way. I've been posting these Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you want to check more of them out, there's a playlist where you can watch all the episodes. And it's been just a real blast. I appreciate everybody that's been watching it as of recently, and hopefully you'll get something out of it, and maybe you'll learn a little bit more about myself and the guests that I have on that you may not have known otherwise. So thank you guys for watching, and thanks of course to Brad from New Fury for coming on tonight, man.
Peace out, Cub Scout.